How to score your first or next $1 million gift. 104 easy to understand pages filled with strategies, best practices, and homework assignments is now available in both print and digital formats through Pathway, our book distributor, and Amazon. Quantity discounts are available to nonprofits who want to share books with teams of management, development staff, board, and volunteers. The book becomes available on November 12th, 2024. But for those who pre-order, we have a special offer. Just click on the URL link in the video description and reserve your copy. We'll send you a complimentary copy of our first book, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons, a $16.95 value that provides a solid foundation to understand how to best apply the lessons highlighted in the new book. That's 2 for the price of 1.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin, and on behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 127th episode in our nonprofit empowerment webinar series. This is the format. We have about a half a zillion questions for Lynn Knieriem. Lynn is vice president and one of the owners of Flying Colors Broadcast. Her responsibilities are as varied as her resume. I'm kind of jealous. She's worked at a local radio station and hosted a show called the Woodshop Swap Shop. And she made her way to the BBC. Especially since the pandemic, a lot more companies have moved into the video production, live event, and digital media services business. What can Flying Colors Broadcast say that its competitors can't?
Well, I think our years at it has been the fact that we've been around for the company itself for almost 30 years, and I've been with it for a very long time. We've kind of seen it all in terms of having gone from working at home to working internationally to analog to digital, from digital into being able to do webcasting and bringing in remote presenters into live events. I mean, I feel like during the pandemic, a lot of companies pivoted to become sort of more remote broadcasters and being able to do the virtual stuff where it had been part of our daily mix for 20 years in different capacities. So I think that experience just shows that we've been places where it doesn't always go as planned, and we kind of have figured out ways to roll with the punches and make it come off and work great, and have a lot of years of seeing what's worked and hasn't worked to be able to advise our clients and help them to design their programs that we've seen to be more successful. And I think at the end of the day, it's always about the content. So even if companies come on board with technologies that make it more foolproof in terms of the delivery and the production, I still think that we come at it from a let's get your story told in an authentic way that suits your brand and gets your message across to your constituents.
Well, thank you. We're going to unpack that a little. If there's anything we can agree on, it is that we're all suffering from computer screen fatigue, like we've never experienced it any before. What do you recommend as a remedy?
So, I mean, I think that we are getting back into doing more hybrid events where we don't want to lose the benefit of having that remote audience, because it's increased who we've been able to reach in terms of international audiences, or being able to reach more people because it's more convenient or you didn't have to travel. So the hybrid event where there's an in-person event, but you also have a component of it that's remote is helping, I think, to allow for people that didn't want to necessarily be in front of the screen to attend something in person, but developing your program with that in mind, with the fact that people are tired of sitting in front of a screen all the time. I'm always surprised that during the pandemic would see these remote conferences where there would maybe be a 10-minute break and 3 hours of programming and then a lunch or something. And I think you have to build those things in. You have to bring in interactive elements. Maybe I've seen it work with, they've done yoga, or they've done some kind of get up and dance, or you have to be on your feet to win a raffle, or something that kind of allows them to stretch, using out of the box things to kind of get them up and moving. And then just in general, meetings and stuff, to be able to get out and walk around the block every now and then. I saw this article in the New York Times that said that there was a man who suggested that he walks around the block and comes back in and sits down at his computer just because that's his commute time. And he missed not having that kind of brain session with himself as he was driving into work when he was working at home. So I think getting out and allowing yourself some fresh air and putting that into the meetings as you plan them for the meeting presenters is good.
I love that. This is a personal challenge for me, and obviously I haven't come up with the answer yet. You and Randa position perfectly. How do you suggest to members of our audience that they position themselves in front of their computer screen?
Yes, this is something we work on a lot. And a lot of it is because we do panel type discussions like this, where you want everybody to sort of have the same type of framing.
Yeah.
So we have developed in our virtual studio where we produce some of these things, we actually have a grid that goes on, that goes right through the eyes of where we want the people to position their eyes. So that's helpful. But I think it's just like if you're taking a picture of somebody, just keeping the framing in mind. In broadcast world, we call it 4 buttons, that you should see 4 buttons below the person's chin. And that's because in the broadcast world, they have the graphic titles that come through, and you don't want those to go through their face. So if you have that much of their chest showing, then it allows for a space that you wouldn't chop off their nose or whatever if the graphics were to be there. And then, so if you have the 4 buttons and you keep the headroom so that it's not chopping off the head, but you don't want a lot at the top. And the ways to adjust this that I'm sure probably everybody has discovered at this point is either moving or closing your laptop is one way. A lot of times we have people pile up books or put the laptop. Mine is elevated now on a stack of books about this high. I have a chair that goes up and down, so you can raise it or lower it to be adequate with that. So those are sort of some of the positioning things. And then to position yourself in the center. And I think when you're in a panel and you have the ability to see everybody, just notice, make that kind of a note. If you're like this, and Rand is, sitting squarely, then you want to be the same size as everybody else.
We're going to keep this the real basics, okay? Because for number one, I got to learn, okay? But our audience too. What type of chair should you sit in, and how should you position yourself?
So not a swivel chair, which is what I have. I'm sort of offending like a lot of the rules.
Are you at your home or at the office? Where are you now?
I'm at my home. And yes, I have a dog here, which I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in front of the light that's about to go down on me. So eventually I'm not going to have any light, and I'll be in the dark giving you directions on how to be camera ready. And I'm sitting in a swivel chair. It does go up and down, but if you don't have this as your go-to when you're nervous, then it's probably okay. But yeah,
Are you talking a fixed chair is better?
A fixed chair is better when you're filming somebody or doing presentations. Yes, that you don't swivel.
When do you recommend standing? I'm just wondering, and how can you use that? But it seems to me I wouldn't know where to stand. But what do you recommend about standing?
So yeah, interesting thing with standing that we designed I should say. It's a pretty genius thing that one of our techs came up with. He uses an ironing board, or suggests that our presenters use an ironing board, because you can put it at different heights. And so they would put their laptop at that point, and then they could still stand. And you can also step back from it to get kind of a wider shot of waist up versus just the head shot or whatever. If you're doing something that, we were filming, instead of sending crews out into the field, we were filming people at their homes using what they had. So we had a lot of trying to work with them to get it set up. And some of those times we wouldn't want them to just be sitting. We'd want them to be standing so we could put a graphic underneath and post or something, or to do something different with it. So the ironing board is a good technique. It's like a stand-up desk.
And boy, I would have never guessed that. Do you agree that people project better when they're standing than they're sitting? I know when I was back in my university days, when I had important people, and when you're a fundraiser, everyone's important. You know, I always prefer to stand. I thought had more presence when I was standing than sitting.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's the case, unless their person's tell that they're nervous is that they sway a lot or move too much, and then it can be troublesome. But I agree. I think a lot of people present better if that's their thing. In a conversational type thing, I think it comes across a little strange, but in the right setting when you're doing a presentation, I think it works well.
Let's keep the basics. What do you recommend, you know, for the best lighting and audio?
Yeah, so this is a tough one because everybody kind of went to the ring light immediately, and now there are all kinds of vloggers and whatever and setups that come up with your iCam that has the ring light. I always find that, especially if people wear glasses, that they're really difficult to not have the ring showing up in the people's eyes or someplace. You already are sort of stuck with the reflection of the monitor. So what we liked were the cubes, the loom cubes they're called, and we use them in broadcast world to kind of light random things. It can be that you want a piece of a prop lit or something, so you just throw these little cubes in, but they're much softer and they're kind of panel light versus the ring light. So I like those. I think regular lamps work well too, as long as they're positioned in the right way, and they should be behind your laptop so that it kind of flows down on top of you without showing up in your eyes. And right now, like I see the reflection, Jim, of
My glasses, right?
the screen. There's a trick for that too.
Okay, I want to know it.
That if you have them, and these are so filthy that I'm not sure there would be a reflection in it, but if you have your glasses straight set, you see reflections. But the broadcaster's trick is that if you tilt them just a little bit so that they're down on your nose, so instead of straight up like this, they're like a little bit down like that. It takes
You look like a stern grandparent this way.
You not only get the librarian effect, but you also get rid of the reflection a little bit.
I didn't know that. Huh?
Yeah, so that's what I don't know if you have to go that low, but there's a little something in the play of the glasses. And there are certain frames that are better than that. You can actually get them now that are non-reflective.
Yeah. But what do you think about natural lighting, and how can you best take advantage of it?
So I feel like it's the best. I mean, I love the natural light, but it is like you will see the sun set on me, and it does change. So you have to kind of have the ability to move with your laptop to avoid it. What we don't like is being blown out because the natural light is coming in from behind and making it so that you are then sort of just in the dark in the front. So natural light needs to flow onto your face. So if you can chase it around the room as the sun moves, then it's perfect. Or if you have other lamps you can turn on, like in a few minutes, I may have another one here that will do a little fill on this side because it's coming in too harsh on this side. But yeah, I prefer natural lighting because I think it's just the easiest to work with for people. But if you're in a place where you know that it's about to storm in 15 minutes, then it's going to change, or it is at sunset. And
I was going to say, when should you feel comfortable doing it outdoors? Like, I think 2 shows again, Randa was taking her 7-year-old son to the park. So she did something outside, and I think Randa came across pretty well.
Yeah, noise is usually the bigger factor outside. So if you have some kind of a microphone that has a live windsock on it or something that helps with that, is omnidirectional, then it would really help. But yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that you're getting a little intimate setting of wherever the person is, and it can kind of play to your advantage that way.
Yeah. in the business that Randa and I am in, fundraising, first of all, the one absolute rule was when you're asking for a good chunk of money, and that will vary from organization to organization, that always had to be done face to face. That was the cardinal rule. And the pandemic just kind of turned things upside down. And actually, it's been a plus in many different ways that we've seen success, particularly if a relationship is already in place that you can ask screen to screen, okay? Probably you can't ask a stranger, okay? But if it's someone that's been a donor in the past, but when you were meeting face to face, it was all about maintaining eye-to-eye contact. So what's your recommendations in always maintaining on a video conference eye-to-eye or screen to screen and eye-to-eye contact?
Well, the interesting thing is, as I'm sure you're aware, that if I'm looking at you and I'm actually not looking to you like I have eye contact, that you have to be looking at the little green light up at the top where the camera is in order to truly be looking into somebody's eyes. So if you're able to, and I think a lot of professional broadcasters do this, look at the camera and just think about the audience or listen to it almost like it's a phone call, but continue to maintain eye contact with that camera light, then you should probably be a broadcaster professional. But that is the trick. If you want to truly look like you're looking into
It's
their eyes.
almost counterintuitive, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. And you want to look at yourself and you want to look at the other people when they're speaking. But the one thing that I would suggest not doing that I see a lot of is because we all tend to have a lot of screens going these days where you may have your notes up on one, and just to be cognizant that if you do put your notes someplace, that really forces your eye contact with where that is and makes you look like you're distracted or not paying attention, even though that's part of what you're doing. It can come across to the viewer like you're looking away and maybe, I don't know, watching your children play or something. So to just be careful about looking off screen if you do use multiple screens.
Yeah. Let's talk about length of time. Typically, a fundraising visit, first of all, it's usually how long the donor will give you. But typically, they're about 30 to 40 minutes. And I'm kind of a time freak. I believe in everything we do in life, we run out of time. And particularly in the fundraising business. Do you think you should plan a video conferencing meeting for the same length of time as an in-person meeting?
Well, I think in the case of a personal meeting where you're just one-on-one with somebody talking, I'm
Yeah,
not sure that that same kind of fatigue that we reference is taking place if you're able to, have meaningful dialogue and have things that are, results that are coming about as a result of that or whatever. I think that that's fine. I do think that in planning an event where an audience is going to be participating, it needs to become more of a concern that there certainly is a window of attention that you will get, and it goes down dramatically when it's in online versus in person. So, I think if you're having a good conversation with somebody, then time is not as much as the content, but keeping it in mind for events.
yeah. If you suspect that the donor or the other person on the video conference is either new, of course, you wonder how can anybody be new to the technology, or let's say uncomfortable, how can you help them?
Well, I mean, I think testing and doing some of the things in advance when they're not on the spot to do that stuff to make them comfortable with it. But at the end of the day, I'm sort of a believer, and maybe this is because of my age, that if somebody's truly uncomfortable with that form of communication, then don't force it. You
Yeah.
can pick up the phone and talk them through slides that maybe you sent in
Hmm.
advance, or have a meaningful conversation in another way that they feel more comfortable with. I don't know as though it's the answer for everybody in every situation. I'm not sure that it's necessary to always see somebody. I'm always saying to my kids, do we have to be on FaceTime? Like, can you not just call me? But I'm excited that they actually chose to FaceTime instead of texting.
Miranda, I'd like you to enter the conversation at this point, not with your questions, but my thinking is if you already know the donor and you know what they look like, they know what you look like, you have built, I don't like to say a relationship, but a friendship. You don't have to do a video conference every time. In that instance, a very good telephone conversation might be preferred by both of you. Because let's face it, it takes more work. And I'm going to be blunt, but I know Randa and Lynn have to do a lot of more work to get camera ready than John and I. We have to shave and maybe put a comb through our hair. And you all look a lot better, but it requires a little more. So when do you think the doors open that you can say, let's just do it by telephone rather than by video?
I like to build that into my conversations as we go. As we're building that relationship, I typically start with in person or want to meet them in person somewhere at an event or something to start with. And then I try to build it in, and as I get to know this person or this donor, whoever I'm talking to, ask them what they like best. Like today I've had a coffee meeting because that's what this person liked best. I've had a text message conversation because that was where they were comfortable, and I've had a phone call. So, it's all of the above.
I want to reach to a member of our learning community. Marjorie Hope, are you out there? She's the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Connect Diplomacy, and she has done tremendous research on how people are different and how they're common and similar around the world. But you know more about dressing and good taste than anybody I know. How do you pick the clothes? And you do a heck of a lot of video conferencing and podcasts. How do you pick your wardrobe for the different video conferencing you do?
Yeah, so first you have to know what your environment's going to be. If it's a formal business meeting, you're going to aim for more business casual or business attire, a collared shirt or blouse. I recommend highly solid colors. Simple patterns, if you don't want to do a solid, work best. Now, if it's a creative or informal setting, a casual meeting, you can go with something slightly more relaxed, like
I got a polo shirt on.
Or polo shirt, but you have to consider also color. So you want to avoid overly bright or dark colors because bright colors can be distracting on camera. And
what's a bright color?
Like a hot yellow or a hot orange. Whereas a dark color might blend into the background, like a dark black, let's say, or a dark brown. And again, it depends on your lighting. But I would stick to mid-tones. Actually, everybody here is dressed perfectly. I think your colors are all great, what everybody has on. Colors like blue, green, light.
I hear it a lot. I never hear that, so thank you.
Yeah, your color looks great, actually. But you really want to avoid any busy pattern in whatever you're going to wear. It creates a bad effect on camera. Check the background lighting. I know you guys talked about that. Make sure your lighting is good. Make sure you have natural light if you're by a window and the sun's not shining in your face. If it is, close your window. But be comfortable and confident. And what I mean by that, wear something you can breathe, because especially if you're on camera, you don't have to wear tight pants. You could be wearing shorts, but wear something you feel comfortable and confident in.
I gotta say, I'm wearing gym shorts.
But also test it out first if you can in front of the camera. And it lets you see any details such as maybe a folded collar or an awkwardly positioned fabric. But these simple choices, they'll help you look polished and professional and enhance your virtual presence. And we all live in a virtual world.
Which I do a lot. But you've been, help me, I can't keep up. You've been to 13 countries, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you know about like 200. And that's what your book's about. But do you find people in other countries dress differently for video conferencing?
interestingly, when I went to different countries and I love to go shopping, I really did find differences. So, for example, in England, they're more tailored, more simple, more basic. Where if you go into like Italy, is more ruffles and lace and a little more frills. But again, none of that really matters because when you're on camera, whatever you wear is going to be just fine. Remember, they're only seeing the top. The biggest thing, and I can't emphasize this enough, is a smile.
So I'm just curious, now that we're working remote and hybrid, how do you think, especially in the nonprofit sector, how do you think our leaders can help foster that community and connection when we're virtual, especially because in my line of work and where I'm at right now, people are so passionate and mission driven, and I really don't want it to feel transactional when we're online.
So are you meaning more for one-on-one type meetings with potential donors, or presentation, broadcast kind of?
The space that I'm in, selfishly for myself, I'm asking, but the space that I'm in right now is a lot of, I'm in the room with the board committees, sometimes one-on-ones as well, but often it's a committee or a subcommittee to help plan an event or something. And I'm curious about how to help create that connection, because there are some in our group who they only have the time to meet virtually, but I don't think they're as comfortable. And I want to help them feel a little bit more comfortable and more expressive so that we can get some decisions made.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the personal connection that you make you can use the remote and the virtual world to an advantage, in the fact that only during the pandemic and when we started to do all of this remote stuff did we get an eye into people's homes or wherever they were working from, or you got to meet their dogs, or you got to see their kids interrupting a meeting, or know that their son is a big video gamer because their internet was flailing and stuff. I mean, I think it's just taking cues from different things and kind of having intentional conversations, maybe more than we did in the past, when you're on a phone call or whatever, to be able to do that, to really connect and listen to what they're saying and take cues from that. Yes, Jim?
I'd like to interrupt you. As a fundraiser that's been fundraising longer than I like to admit, when I visited someone's office or home, I was like a private investigator, and I was, fiercely looking what books, what mementos, what knickknacks did they have, and it gave me a lot of clues. I can ask them for questions about it. Being in a video connection, how can you kind of search out those clues when you're actually physically not in their home or your office? And they can be so revealing.
Yeah. I mean, with everybody blurring their backgrounds, you really can't do the search around the office. So maybe ask them a question about that. Is that a painting I see in the background? Is that, what did you do with that? Yeah. But also, we live in this digital world, and for better or for worse, there's social media out there. And a lot of people post, things on social media that you may find cues on. You look at their Facebook page and see, sort of what they like about some of those things. I mean, it doesn't all have to be used for bad.
I'm playing with it because I lost my Eskin fundraising training logo, but I'm better positioned. Randa, could you continue with our millennial brain side questions?
Sure. So I'm focused now, kind of segueing into more inclusion. I have also, sometimes some of the participants in these bigger meetings and sometimes one-on-ones are with people who have some limited access to technology, or maybe they have a disability. What do you think as far as strategies that we can use to help bridge the digital divide when we're in that setting?
So I think people who are invited to the meeting, whether it's in person or you should all feel comfortable with the way that it is, the way that you described, that you ask people what their favorite way to communicate is and kind of adjust your agenda according to that. I think you have to, again, know your audience and be able to make amendments to what you think would work for that. But trying to test in advance, making sure that everybody on your team, that you sort of have more of a say over how they interact, should be trained on it, should make sure that they're muting their mics in between, should not be distracted with different things. I mean, there are things that you can do that are they're not looking around, that they're not turning off their camera when they're not saying anything, that if they're there at the meeting, that they're truly present. Having a little bit of an etiquette for your team that's joining you on the calls would help. And then, you know, just making sure that you make the client feel as comfortable as possible, and not put a square peg into a round hole. If they don't want to use that type of technology, then, you know, meet them where they are.
No, it was brilliant. Thank you. So now I do
I just put on, I had $2.50 readers, and I put on my prescription glasses that cost about, I don't know, 100 times more, but I don't think it helps with the reflection.
No, those are better.
Oh, okay, that's worth it. Okay.
Yeah, those are better.
Amanda, continue with our millennial side questions.
Sure. So now I kind of have some questions. I'm just curious about your perspective, if you see any differences, what they are in sort of the video conferencing aptitudes of your audiences, whether is it generational, is it industry? I'm curious because I've heard a lot of things about millennials, which I am. And so I'm just curious if you've noticed differences between the generations as far as video conferencing abilities and stuff and their comfort level.
Well, I think definitely there's generational, and it's not necessarily for everybody, because there's that person who is my age who's really good at technology. I would not be that person, but and there also are probably, you know, younger people who are not as into the technology. But generally speaking, I do think that you know, after 2007, when the iPhone and smartphones came on the scene, there are this generation that we're appealing to, somewhat the new generation. They don't know anything but kind of having that end result of video being built into everything. And I think they will probably have the perspective that they need to have video when they are fixing their dishwasher, or when they're, you know, calling somebody about their utility bill or whatever. They just have this, they were born with it, and it's been part of it. And I think that's obviously going to play into their expectations of where video shows up, which is why I was saying that my kids always want to FaceTime me. And I'm thinking, why do you need to see me, you know, when I'm in the kitchen making dinner? Why can't we just talk on the phone?
Aging, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
by the way, you're aging very well. I don't know how old
you
you are, but you're aging very well.
Thank you. So I think that the group that is kind of the grandparents' age, or what I'm getting into now, you know, luckily Facebook allowed us to sort of have this ability to reach out to see photos of our grandkids, or, you know, keep up with our friends' kids and stuff. So there was a little bit of a push to get into technology, which really helped in that. I think the other thing that's interesting is that because that older group, or the younger group, was born with that stuff, their attention to the quality of the video is a little more forgiving. Like our generation kind of grew up with network broadcasts where the quality of how everybody was positioned, and the lighting and the audio, like if something happened and there was an audio glitch during an NBC show, you know, it was like, oh, that was, you know, terrible. And now we're just have grown in this age of nobody's audio ever works, and they're talking, and they're, you know, so we've kind of, and I think that younger generation grew up with that, so they're way more forgiving and able to watch reality TV, and they like those shows because they're kind of homegrown. And so I don't know, there are a lot of interesting twists to it, but hopefully, you know, I think there's nothing like a pandemic to kind of force that your hand at those things, because
you know why I'm in the webinar business?
Yeah.
I couldn't do live workshops anymore.
Yeah.
And God is saying, Jim, you got to experiment webinars, and then I had no choice. And let me move to a question. I think together with technology, I want to make the webinar experience more like the live experience. I've had a lot of people who used to come to the live workshops, and now they're part of our virtual learning community. And they say the two things they miss most is seeing who else is there and the opportunity to network before and after the program. Do you have any thoughts how we can use video conference technologies to respond to those two gaps?
Well, back to the experience that I think we have at Flying Colors, we've had a lot of clients who did it very well during the pandemic, where not every event was an educational thing in the sense of giving a presentation on something or showing results or meeting or making some kind of like goals and whatever. Some of it was just social entertainment that was just purely for the idea of networking. One client here in San Antonio had Wolfgang Puck as a chef who cooked with them. Showed them how to make
Oh,
something.
no one does it better.
And they sent out these kits and to different to their employees, and they all cooked with Wolfgang Puck online, and they were able to
That
show
company
their
was
cameras.
really spoiling its workforce.
Yeah, I mean, it was so fun. So there were lots of team building kind of things. They had a golfer on that showed people, and they were, showing them at their homes with their golf clubs, like talking about their swings and stuff. And we did all of that virtually. I mean, I think it's just coming up with some out of the box ways of networking, of maybe building into your event a 30-minute cocktail hour where you send out the cocktail kit and they make it and everybody has a cocktail, while talking about some things in networking, and even getting into these, separate rooms that you can go into to chat with somebody that you may want to, I mean, there are definitely ways to build that into your program that could be super interesting. Games were a big thing where they had teams that were playing kind of games. And so I think it's finding some team building exercises that you use the video for, and it can be fun. It can be.
Let me ask you this. This is we use Zoom, and I think, by the way, it's time for more competition. I grew up, you didn't photocopy, you Xeroxed, okay? And now, you photocopy. There's so many different companies. And, people now Zoom. Where you want to be is when the name of your company becomes a verb. And I think we're going to see some more technology. But what are your thoughts, on, I know when we want to show people like this is a webinar format. And when we want to show people in a meeting format, you can put everybody's face on the screen, but they're the size of a postage stamp. What do you see as the trade-offs there?
Well, I mean, I think this idea of bringing people in and out as they speak and being able to have them be maybe in a gallery, that they have the option of being able to see the gallery, but then they brought in when they do the questions. You're doing that well in this format. I don't know, maybe there have been a lot of people who have come through our office demonstrating that they have a virtual reality where you sort of these, avatar stuff go in, and you can go to the conference, and you can actually go to the jazz club like you were and get with somebody. Randa and I could go there and watch a jazz band and stuff, and it's all kind of in this virtual reality world. I think people were building that out a lot during the pandemic, or watching sports games through that. I'm not sure. We've not been able to really find a bite on that yet, because we have the ability to do some of those things, and we haven't found a customer that would be willing to kind of go that route. But who knows? Yeah. What do you think the next waves of this are?
Well, I know those are the two gaps I want to fill. People want to know who else is participating, and they want to have the opportunity before or afterwards. I don't know, that be through a breakout room or something, to network. Yeah. I know we did 90-minute live workshops at a local Microsoft store. my wife and I always had a rule that we would stay until the last guest had left. But this was right around dinner time, and it was amazing, and it was a good thing. People love to stay and network. And so that's definitely one of the gaps we want to fill in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah, we have had customers who have wanted to use these. There are lots of video conferencing groups out there that spend a lot of money building out these networking rooms that you could go into, and it costs a lot on these platforms. And honestly, with and we've had government clients as well as corporate clients and different people try that. Nobody ever goes in there. I think it's just very different than, I mean, our experience has been that the numbers of the people who actually used that networking piece and went in the virtual rooms to go into that didn't happen very often. So,
well, no, we experimented with a chat space in the breakout room. That's exactly what our experience was. But in a live setting, they stay forever.
exactly.
I know they kept my dinner late for 2 hours. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there may be drinks and live conversation with people there. I'm not sure what that can be. What that I have not seen successfully that happen. That's the beauty of the fact that we're able to have an occasional in-person event nowadays. I think that they like that in-person connection that is hard to replace.
What's your advice on if I'm meeting with a donor, sharing slides or visuals and or a proposal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there's a good way to do it where it's not distracting and you're able to stay on the same page, so to speak, so that they're not following along and you're on page 4 and they're, in a printout that they have or whatever, it works well. I definitely think that people way over crowd their graphics, that the graphics are really generally supposed to be supportive for virtual or visual learners to be able to see it and understand what they're talking about versus have everything that you're ever going to say on the slide, which is what we sometimes get a lot of. So we counsel people to keep the font a certain size and keep it very visually appealing and that. But I think that's a positive about being able to have these collaborative meeting platforms that we didn't always have.
This one's inspired by my late mother. What are the absolute no-nos for a productive video conference meeting?
I think trying to multitask. If you are in the meeting, you want to be there, because if you were in person, you wouldn't be rude and be doing something else or checking your phone or turning your camera off or all of those things. So I really think it's just giving people the same respect that you would if they were sitting across the table from you.
Yeah. Boy, that's a tough one. A lot of us have got murdered in person on checking on our smart devices. Absolutely murdered, including yours truly. What's your recommendation on a very strong way to close a virtual meeting?
Yeah. I mean, there's the obvious going through next steps, you're talking about the deliverables and what everybody's job is. I think it's really the aftermath of it, that of what you follow up with, and that can be kind of clever. It can be a video recap of what you did, the highlights of the thing that you could edit in a little thing, because now editing's super easy for people. There's lots of opportunities for basic editing software for people to do their own. So maybe, or surprise them with a thank you note or something. Nobody have
By the way, I call the secret sauce. I love sending handwritten notes, because how many handwritten notes do you receive daily?
Never any. I mean, I don't even go to the mailbox anymore because there's never anything interesting like that there.
Yeah, I believe, and I know Rand is big on that too. We call that the secret sauce. Is after meeting a donor, particularly for the first time, is quickly. I had this old-fashioned rule: get it in that same day's mail cycle so they receive it the next day. That will have a big impact.
Yeah.
And set you apart from everybody else.
And actually, my business partner is big on photographs and taking screenshots of kind of the virtual meeting. So she'll take a sneak screenshot and maybe include that in the hand note of like, love meeting with you, where you're all kind of smiling and whatever. She does that. So
Peering into your crystal ball, what do you see in the future of video conferencing?
yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, that hybrid events, I think, are probably more where it's going to take place, where there's the extension of in-person events that have a component of virtual that's added to it in our space of doing a lot of live events. But I'd like to that, we get more creative with being able to, with all of people being able to produce their videos and do things through AI and some of that stuff, that maybe we have some jazzy roll-ins instead of just a slide or something that they can kind of keep things interesting with that. I love your open and your close to your show, stuff like that, things that make it seem more like a real program that you're watching as opposed to just as another Zoom meeting that's on your schedule.
Randa, we got a few minutes left. I want to give you time for one more question.
Fabulous. The only other thing I was going to ask, kind of tied into the others I was talking about, is how can we continue this trend of, whether it's generational or something else, people who may not have embraced video conferencing and some of this stuff before, how can we continue that trend so that people are using it for professional or personal reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always said that I think there should be some kind of a class where the younger generation teaches the older people about their phones and answers all their questions about how to use FaceTime and how they're not, liking posts that they shouldn't and all sorts of stuff. And that the older people teach the younger generation how to balance a checkbook or to write a check or to address an envelope or something. I mean, and I think that there are things happening.
Hey, Lynn, what's a checkbook?
Exactly. But every now and then you have to write one and it's in cursive and people don't even know how to do that. So I mean, I think that there could be a great exchange, and I do think that through grandparents and grandchildren that happens naturally. Maybe some kind of gaming. I know that my mom and all of her friends always played like all kinds of computer games. So maybe something that's a little bit of a soft pedal into some of those things to help them, that now they know how to navigate their mouse better, or they know how to do this because it was through a game. I'm not sure. That's but I know that during the pandemic, we helped a lot of people through doing presentations and things remotely, and they were at a lot of varying different levels. And I will say that everybody was pretty willing, and if you have some fun with it and give them tips like the irony board and some of those things, they feel empowered when they have a few of those things at their hands. And I think, yeah, we learned a lot about people and humanity, and had a lot of fun with it. And
By the
hopefully,
way, I would be careful, and I'm getting a little defensive now, not to stereotype the senior category. Seniors have two big commodities, okay? They got money and time. And so they are really embracing technology in a way that, we were not seeing 10, 15 years ago. As we expected, Lynn, this was a very rich hour. I've learned what glasses to wear and not to wear. And by the way, is it okay if we have people in the audience that would like to benefit for the expertise and experience that Flying Colors brings to the table? Is it okay if they reach out to you via email or your cell phone?
absolutely. Yes. Love to hear from anybody.
And we're going to continue. Our next webinar is going to be on Wednesday, November 13th. Lynn, a virtual book launch. So it's the first one I've done. And that's when we go on Amazon. And, one of the things I got to learn is funny things happen. How it flirts away. What's your tip on how I can show off a book without it kind of flailing away?
Take off your background. Your
And
your
so I
beard
go
dark.
natural like the both of you. Okay.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I'm scared. When you talk to somebody who knows, you learn a lot. Lynn, we know in fundraising, there are two gifts you can give, time and money. And when you get older, you actually realize that time's the more precious of the gifts, because unlike money, it can never be replaced. So thank you so much for sharing a very, very rich conversation and sharing the knowledge that you have provided the sector when it really needs most. And we'd love to work with you again. And again, thank you for sharing your time and your experience and your insights. We've all learned something. And to our learning community, thank you for joining us. And Randa Luna, thank you for providing a splendid millennial perspective. Thank you for being such a wonderful subject matter expert. And thank you for enriching our audience on how to become more camera ready. Thank you.